Support comes from BECU, a member-owned credit union putting people over profit, offering financial services and support to the community with access to local financial centers, over 30,000 ATMs, and online resources at becu.org. Federally insured by NCUA.
Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. We're living in busy, interesting times. So busy and interesting, maybe you missed that we flew a helicopter on Mars on Monday. We'll talk with a scientist at Western Washington University who's part of a team making it possible to beam back those full-color images of the red planet. But first, let's get you caught up. Seattle leaders promised to stay focused on public safety and criminal justice reforms after Minneapolis jury found former police officer Derek Chauvin guilty on all 3 counts yesterday.
Hopefully it's going to bring some peace to the family, some calm to the community. But Seattle, King County, we have a lot and a long way to go.
That's Seattle King County NAACP President Carolyn Riley Payne. Seattle Police Chief Adrian Diaz called it a watershed moment.
Today's verdict is an indication that change and justice are possible.
Also, yesterday in Olympia, lawmakers passed a bill requiring police to step in if they see a fellow officer using excessive force. It's headed to Governor Inslee for his signature. This year's wildfire season is off to an early start. The State Department of Natural Resources says thanks to high temperatures, winds, and a little rain, there were almost 100 small wildfires just last week. That's about as many as we usually have in an entire month this time of year. Cooler weather on the way will help. And State Attorney General Bob Ferguson is calling on lawmakers to decriminalize drug possession in Washington before they wrap things up on Sunday. Ferguson said yesterday he sees an opening for decriminalization after the state Supreme Court knocked down parts of Washington's felony drug possession law. The AG says he hopes legislators will pass legislation that moves addiction issues outside the court system entirely.
Altimeter data confirms that Ingenuity has performed its first flight of a powered aircraft to another planet.
If you pulled up YouTube or Twitter on your phone and watched the first powered control flight on another planet earlier this week, there are some Bellingham-based scientists you can thank for that. The footage of the Mars Ingenuity helicopter's historic flight was filmed by some high-powered cameras on the Perseverance rover, supported by the Western Mars Lab at Western Washington University. Dr. Melissa Rice runs that lab. She is also a co-investigator for the Mars 2020 Perseverance rover mission. Melissa, it's really good to talk to you.
It's great to be here.
So I know your work is on the imaging, and I want to leave this conversation completely understanding that. But first, tell me what we pulled off this week with Ingenuity on Mars.
Yeah, you got it exactly right, calling it the first controlled powered flight on another planet. We have technically flown on other planets before. Perseverance was flying through the atmosphere towards the ground as it was landing on Mars a couple months ago now on February 18th. But never have we taken off in the atmosphere of another planet from the ground. So that is what happened 2 days ago now with the little Ingenuity helicopter. And that is the first time we've ever done that in the atmosphere of another planet. NASA is calling it a Wright brothers moment, and that's what it is, a real first.
Okay, so Ingenuity did this amazing thing. It's up there on Mars, but it is not alone. The Mars rover, Perseverance, is there as well. And this is really one of the reasons we're talking, because you had a hand in developing this mounted cameras that sit on the rover, and you're actually the reason we can even see Ingenuity doing what it does.
I don't know that I'm the reason, but I was part of the team that put the Mastcam-Z cameras together and designed how we were going to see with these scientific eyes of the rover. And yes, it was the Mastcam-Z cameras that were able to zoom in to get those really beautiful high-resolution images of Ingenuity taking off. But that's just one aspect of what Mastcam-Z is on Mars to do. And the real science is zooming into the rocks and the landforms on the horizon and planning for where the rover is going to drive in the next year, 2 years, and beyond.
Yeah, this isn't your typical point-and-shoot camera here. This has a very specialized mission.
It does, yeah, and it's different from any cameras we've ever sent to Mars before. The biggest difference is in the name. These cameras are called Mastcam-Z. Mastcam is for cameras on the mast, and the Z is for zoom. That's the big new thing here. These cameras, for the first time, have lenses that can zoom way in. And we can also zoom way out to get wide-angle shots and span the horizon really quickly and take in just the whole scene around us pretty quick.
You say that quite matter-of-factly, but I read specifically that your Mastcam-Z camera can pick up a fly from the length of a soccer field.
Yeah, if there's flies on Mars, we'll spot them.
The other thing that's interesting to me that I read about this camera is the way it sees color. Tell me a little bit about Martian color.
Mars, as we know from pop culture and sci-fi, is the red planet. And it's really just the red planet to us, because our eyes evolved here on Earth to see the colors that are the brightest on the surface of Earth.
Is that the red, green, blue?
Exactly, the red, green, blue. And that makes a lot of sense because vegetation is green mostly, but it's really helpful to be able to pick out that bright red, ripe piece of fruit amongst the dense vegetation, you know, for those of us in the Northwest to go pick those red, ripe huckleberries. Being able to distinguish between those reds and greens and blues, that's really helpful for us here on Earth. Those capabilities, though, in our own eyes don't really help us out on Mars because in those wavelengths of light, pretty much everything looks reddish, brownish, orange. Not much color diversity there. But that doesn't mean that Mars isn't a colorful place. Mars is just colorful in wavelengths of light that would be visible to Martians, not necessarily to humans. So we designed Mastcam-Z to be a Martian. Mastcam-Z is most sensitive to colors that are in not the blues, greens, and reds, but more like the reds and near infrareds. So Mastcam-Z can see the colors that a natural-born Martian might be evolved to see that are beyond what your eye or my eye is sensitive to.
Wow. Wow. You know, I think it's amazing that they're even up there, but I'm sure there is a mission that needs to be taken care of. What are Perseverance and Ingenuity doing while they're on Mars?
Ingenuity is flying. It did its first flight a couple of days ago, as the world saw, but that's not it. It's got a handful of other flights that we have planned out, and those are all going to happen within the next month. And once Ingenuity is done with its flight demonstrations, then it's Perseverance's time to shine. And that's when the real science mission for Perseverance begins. And it's going to be a long journey. We are looking at a river delta that's preserved stacks of rocks that formed in an ancient lake. We're looking at that delta from a distance of several kilometers away, and it's going to take us roughly a year to drive up to that delta with Perseverance. There are lots of roses to sniff along the way, and so we're going to stop and study whatever rocks of interest we encounter on the way. But it's a big journey to get to this enormous science target, you know, kind of the jackpot for a Mars scientist is studying rocks that formed in an ancient lake. But even that is just the beginning of what the mission has set out to do. Perseverance is laying the groundwork for a long campaign called Mars Sample Return. So Perseverance is going to study these rocks on Mars. It's going to take pictures. It's going to take chemical measurements, and it's going to send all that data back to scientists like me here on Earth who are going to study them. But Perseverance is taking things a step further as well. It's going to drill into some of these rocks that we decide are the most interesting, that have the best chances of preserving life. And Perseverance is going to store little samples of those rocks in some fancy sample tubes that are hermetically sealed and left on the surface of Mars. And then the next mission is going to go to Mars a few years later, pick up those samples, and launch them back to Earth.
Okay.
That whole process of getting those rocks back to Earth might take 10 years. But that is really what we are all after here, is getting those Mars rocks back on Earth. And that's where the real science is going to begin.
This is amazing, though, because for the next 10 years, we can witness what's happening up on Mars through these machines. And I don't know, I just think it's the coolest darn thing.
Yeah, we really, and when I say we, I don't just mean the rover team, I mean all of humanity. We have an avatar on Mars that is that we can all live vicariously through. And it's interesting, people often ask me, do you call Perseverance a he or a she or an it or a they? And my answer is, we refer to Perseverance as a we. Perseverance is really the embodiment of all of us who've gone into making this possible, all of us who are watching the journey. And when I talk about what Perseverance is doing, I say we are watching Ingenuity fly, and we are driving to Jezero Crater, and we are going to collect some rocks.
What an amazing way to look at the universe and the world. Dr. Melissa Rice is an associate professor of planetary science at Western Washington University, co-investigator on the 2020 Mars Perseverance rover mission. Really appreciate it. Thanks again. Really amazing stuff.
Thank you.
Seattle Now is produced by Clare McGrane, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.